Now we, in this work, when we're asked for help, it's usually by someone who has some experience with some form of metaphysics, and so we can say, oh, I will take care of it absently. I don't have to see the patient or talk to the patient, and that's pretty generally understood, and it's accepted. A medical man, even in the mental medical sciences, can't do that, because that is an unknown thing in medicine for a person to be in Africa and get healed in New York. And you would have to thereby cater, at least for the time being, to that particular thing insofar as seeing the patient and letting them tell their history and probably gradually breaking it in upon them that in addition to everything else there is a prayer therapy going on which works absently. But that would be a matter of education, just like in the beginning of Christian Science. Patients always came to the practitioner and insisted on personal visits. But gradually the practitioners were able to say to the patient, oh, but we're healing through prayer, so you won't have to come in every day. You just come in once a week, but I'll keep praying the rest of the time. And that was accepted. So it is now in these clinics where there are doctors working through prayer therapy, as there is in Redlands, California. They gradually make it known that in addition to these personal visits and interviews, that there is a prayer therapy taking place. And of course the person knows that you can pray for a person anywhere, and so gradually they can become accustomed to the idea that their physical presence isn't always necessary. And of course that would act the same way. Over a period of time, it would be possible to educate the general public to know that if you went to a mental scientist or mental medical practitioner, that because the principal therapy was prayer, that after the first visit there wouldn't be any need for many personal visits, or that we could take up work for your cousin out in Detroit through this prayer therapy. And gradually the public would awaken to that fact. We have done that in our work so that it's pretty generally understood, if not by the patient. Sometimes a patient who knows nothing of this work wants help, but then the one through whom they are appealing will say, it's all right, the practitioner doesn't have to call on you, it's all done by prayer, so they can do it out in California or New York. Patient says, oh, prayer, that's different. Yes, they can pray anywhere. And so we very quickly can train those who come to us, even beginners, not to be dependent on personal visits. Now, in my practice, I'm sure that I do not see more than one patient out of 100 at any time. I'm sure that 99% of my practice are people that I never see. I mean, never see while I'm treating them. I may run into them on some trip or class trip or something, but when they write to me for help, it comes from all over the country: United States, Canada, Central America, Europe, North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Of course, these people don't expect to see me. They understand that it's a prayer therapy. But what most of them do not understand is this: they think that we are praying to God for them, and that we have some kind of a pull with God that is going to operate in their behalf. And that isn't the truth at all. That isn't our type of prayer therapy. Our type of prayer is the understanding of a principle which does not permit disease, sin, death as a reality. And therefore, it is a principle known within us that destroys the appearance. Always remember, we are not reaching out to God to do something for a patient. We are not expecting God to do something for a patient. If God could do anything for a patient, heaven forbid that he should wait until we ask him to do it or pray for them. To me, that would be a sinful kind of arrangement. If there were a God could help you and didn't do it until I was employed to pray for you, I wouldn't want that kind of a God. No, there's no such God. The God the one God maintains and sustains its own image and likeness. The one God is love. The one God is infinite divine intelligence. The one God is infinite divine power, and because of that, there could be no power in a sin, a disease, or death, except such power as general consent would accept. Not you or me. It isn't you or I who accept these things. It's a universal consent. The very first discovery that I made in the practice that took me away from other practitioners and general practice of metaphysics was that I saw clearly that the fault, the error, was never in your mind, never in your thought. And one of the things that opened my eyes to that was the case of a woman. This goes back to 1931, and I'm telling you, she's going strong today. A woman then in middle years who was a bed invalid with arthritis from the neck all the way down to the ankle, in as terrific a pain as person could be in with that particular disease. But she was a Christian Scientist of long, long standing. But according to everyone who knew her, she was a witch. She was just a she-devil. One of these dominating personalities that always wanted to be boss, and one of those that was always successful in making trouble for everybody. And the result was that as she went from practitioner to practitioner, she was told over and over again, you can't be healed. You can't be. You're too mean. You're just too nasty. You're just too unloving, too unscientific. You can't. You'll have to change your nature. You will have to do. She never did. And lo and behold, in my youthful innocence, my first year of practice, they had to pick on me for that case. And you know, I worked faithfully for 3 weeks. You can imagine how eager I was to show forth a healing in a case like that. I worked eagerly for 3 weeks, and I got just as far as the rest of them had got. I wasn't holding her in that condemnation because I didn't quite know that much about her at the time. But I still did not see through what was necessary. And this particular night I had a telephone call. It was a long-distance call from a distant city. The pain is beyond belief. Something will have to be done, and it'll have to be done tonight. I cannot stand any more of this. All right, I'll sit up all night if it's necessary, see what can be done. And so I began my work. Well, I would treat 10, 15, 20 minutes, stop a while, treat again. As it got toward 11 o'clock, I would lie down for a half hour, take a rest, get up, start treating again. And it went on that way until the morning hours. And I knew I wasn't getting anywhere. I could feel I wasn't any closer then than I'd been when I started. And I thought, you know, there is a truth. If I could ever hit that truth, this case would be healed. But what's that truth? What is the truth that will heal this case? Wouldn't come. Finally, I went to sleep, and I was awakened out of the sleep with the voice saying, I am the truth. I thought, what? I am the truth. I am the truth? No, that doesn't make sense. I need a truth. I need a truth, not I am the truth. I need a truth. What is the truth? I am the truth. I am the truth. I am the truth. If I am the truth, that's the truth about this lady too. There can be no such thing as Joel being the truth and not Mrs. Smith. There's no kind of God like that. I am the truth? Well, then that's the truth about her. What am I sitting up here and working for? Good night. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I had a telephone call of a complete healing. The woman was out of bed, and the woman's still out of bed so far as arthritis is concerned. Well, when I went to this city, and I was wined and dined. Well, wined and dined without wine. You know, in Christian Science, you don't get wine. But I was shown a glorious time and treated beautifully, and then came the fatal question. What truth did you know that broke this thing? What happened? And I said, well, what happened was that I caught this glimpse that I am the truth, and that must be true of you. And the family just shrieked. What? She is the truth. She's a devil. But you see, there was the principle. The principle is I am the truth. God is the truth. God is love. God is life. God is it. Not you, not I. God is. But since God is, God universally is. So that must be the truth about all of us. Now, I don't care what the appearances are. They can be sin, disease, death, lack, limitation. The principle is that I am the truth. God is the only truth about any condition. God is the only truth about any person. God is the only truth about any law. And all we have to do is stand in it and not believe the evidence of our eyes or ears. Not believe what we see, not believe what we hear. But be assured of this. If you are going to hold a person in condemnation to their faults or their sins or their errors, you're never going to be a healer. Your attitude has got to be, neither do I judge thee, neither do I condemn thee. Your attitude has got to be, I forgive thee. No matter what it is, I forgive thee. I don't hold you in bondage. And if I can't forgive you, at least God's going to forgive you through me. Now, the moment we release the patient from condemnation, from any fault, from any feeling that they're responsible for the plight that they're in, we have 3/4 of the case licked. The minute we can loose them from all responsibility, from all sin, from all condemnation, all criticism, all judgment, and say, no, neither do I condemn thee. No. The principle is God is the theme of being. God is your life. God is life. God is the life of individual being. God is the law of individual being. Stand on it. Now, you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you don't, because you'll be looking at some people and they'll be awfully good people. And then what are you going to say? Here they are, so good, but in such pain. Now you're in trouble, because now you got a good person and you can't do anything about it. So you cannot see good people, you cannot see bad people, you cannot see healthy people, you cannot see sick people. You've got to close your eyes to those appearances and see only spiritual being, God. Don't see spiritual people. Don't say you are spiritual or you are perfect. That's a lot of metaphysical nonsense. That's a lot of metaphysical cliches. That's the kind of stuff they have in some of the absolute statements. You are spirit. You are spiritual. Don't ever believe it. If you were, you wouldn't be looking around for a practitioner or a teacher. That which is called you, why, that's the thing that's dying daily. How are you going to spiritualize that? You have got to look through good humanhood and bad humanhood. Don't call it spiritual, but with your inner eye, say right there where that good individual is or that bad individual, only spiritual being is, only God is. God is the only being. God is individual life. God is individual man. The minute I say you are good or you are bad, I am the blind leading the blind. The minute I say you are sick, or what's worse, when you're sick, say you are spiritual, I'm lying, I'm a hypocrite. I'm lying to my own, even human intelligence. Imagine going into prison and saying to men, you are spiritual, you are good. You can't do it. Well, there may be a few innocent ones there, but you can't go in there and say to those men, you are spiritual and you are good. What you can say to them is, look, men, human sense, all this nonsense about you is so. But I'll tell you a secret. What you haven't known is that God is real being. You may not be able at first to say that to them openly, because they don't know what you're talking about, so you say it silently in your treatment or prayer. God is your being. God is the reality of you. God is the soul of you. God is infinite being. And all that I'm seeing here is a lie. But you've got to say that about good people, too, and healthy people. Because you're not seeing spiritual man even when they're healthy and good. You're only seeing a good concept of man. You have to close your eyes. This is the most important part of the whole infinite way teaching. You must close your eyes to good humanhood or healthy humanhood in the same degree that you close your eyes to sick humanity or sinful humanity. You've got to ignore both, close your eyes to it, and say God is the central thing. God is your being. God is the law. And stop all this, you are well, and you are well, and you are spiritual, and you are perfect. I've had people say it to me when I've asked for help, and I said, please don't give me that nonsense. If you know any truth about me, know it and get me well. Don't tell me I'm spiritual when I'm lying here sick. I don't want to hear such things. It's an insult to my intelligence. But get silent inside and begin to know the truth about God and His Christ, the real being, the individualization of God. God manifest. That's the glory, isn't it? The holiness. God manifest. Now, the man that you see here, taste, touch, or smell is not spiritual, is not good, is not immortal, is not eternal. So close your eyes to the man you can see here, taste, touch, and smell, and get inside and declare, but God is the essence of the real man. God is the essence of this man, woman, or child. Not what I see here, taste, touch, and smell. That's the man who has to die daily until there's no more left of him. But when I close my eyes, now I say, always begin with the word God. Never begin with the word you. Don't pull that, you are spirit, you are spiritual, you are God, you are perfect. Don't do that in the infinite way. Start with the word God. God is perfect. God is spirit. God is life. God is the soul of individual being. God is manifest as individual being. God is incarnated as individual being. God is all true being. God is the only law. God is only law to any situation. Matter is not a law. Disease is not a law. Human belief is not a law. Theological theory. Do you know how many theological theories there are about you're going to hell? Well, that's not a law either. That's just a theological belief, invented originally to whip people into being good when nothing else would do it. But there's no hell, except the hell we go through on earth. The hell that we go through on earth or after, through the false witness that we bear to each other. There's another principle, or rather it's the same principle, stated in a different way. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Okay? You can do all your healing work with that one commandment. Every time a case is presented to you of a sick, sinful, dying, poor, unemployed person, just remind yourself, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Well, then I can't believe that. Then I can't accept that. No, I can't. Why can't I? Because God is incarnated in the Son. God is the Father, but God is the Son. Did you ever stop to realize that God is both the Father and the Son? How can the Son then be different than the Father? How can the Father be so all-powerful well and the Son be sick and sinning, when God is both the Father and God is the Son? God is incarnated as the Son. The Father is incarnated as the Son. And so the Son is heir of God, joint heir to all the heavenly riches. Now, any time that you accept the humanness of any individual, you are bearing false witness against them, because true witness says that they're not good humans or bad humans. Yeah, you remember it? Call no man on earth your father. Well, now, if we accept that statement of the Master, Where do you have a mortal material man, even a good one? You don't. Call no man on earth your father, for what is your Father which is in heaven? Then your Father is spirit. Now when you start with God as spirit, now I can say you are spiritual. Because I'm not talking about you out here now. I'm not talking about these appearances. I'm talking about the you that you really are. Not what I see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, but what I now see. Now I say, so then, call no man on earth your father. So then, God is your Father. And God is spirit, and God is life, and God is love, and God is power. And you are the Son of God. The Son of God is immortal and eternal, indivisible, one with the Father, joint heir to all the good of the Father, the spirit, life, truth, love, immortality, eternality. That's a treatment. That's a perfect treatment. Perfect treatment. Combine it. Call no man on earth your Father. In other words, the creative principle of you is spirit, therefore all that constitutes your being is spiritual. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor and say that he has a human line of ancestors and he's inherited these tendencies and diseases from them, when you're supposed to be following the teaching of the Master, who reveals that no man on earth is your father. As a matter of fact, even the ancient Hebrews wiped out hereditary disease. First they had it. Oh yes, the sins of the fathers are visited on the children under the third and fourth generation. But 200 years later, a prophet says, no more shall this proverb be used in Israel. The parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. From now on, every man is responsible for his own acts, and his good acts bring spiritual rewards, and his evil acts bring the evil rewards. As ye sow, it says later, so shall ye reap. If you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. If you sow to the Spirit, you reap life everlasting. So, if in my mental sowing I believe and I accept the appearance of you being human, mortal, changeable, sometimes sick, sometimes well, sometimes rich, sometimes poor, sometimes sinful, sometimes saintly, I'm sowing to the flesh. I'm sowing to appearances. I'm judging by appearances. And I must reap corruption. But if I sow to the Spirit, which means if I hold in my spiritual integrity to the great truth that God is the only Father, and God is Spirit, Spirit is the only law, Spirit is the only cause, Spirit alone is real, now I am sowing to the Spirit, and I will reap what? A healthy human? No. I'll reap spiritual man. I'll reap the knowledge and demonstration of spiritual being. Oh, to our human eyesight, it will appear as a healing. It will appear as an employed human instead of an unemployed one, or it will appear as a healthy one instead of a diseased one. But actually, that isn't what took place. And that is the reason I say, in every demonstration, watch this. Don't ever rejoice in the demonstration. Don't ever do it, because sure as fate you're going to lose it. Rejoice in the fact that you have seen Spirit at work, truth at work. Don't rejoice that you've seen a cancer disappear. Don't rejoice that a poor man has come into some money. Don't rejoice that some evil has departed from you. Rejoice only that you have now borne witness to the fact that God is the law of being, that God is the principle of life. What that truth witnessing brought about is immaterial, has nothing to do with us whatsoever. It may remove corns, it may stop a headache, but it may raise the dead. Now the Master illustrated that when the disciples came running back to him. Oh, Master, Master, even the devil is subject unto us through thy name. Oh, no, he said, no, it isn't. No. Don't ever say that. Just rejoice that your names are written in heaven. In other words, just rejoice that you're children of God, not of man. Just rejoice that you're spiritual, not mortal. Ah, you see the difference? In metaphysical practice, like in medical practice or theological practice, you have a God or good power overcoming an evil power. In the infinite way, you don't. In the infinite way, you acknowledge God as the only power. And so, when you're going to rejoice, don't rejoice that error left, because your premise was that error wasn't real and wasn't there. And so if you're going to rejoice at it leaving, you're going to acknowledge all over again what your treatment annihilated. When the Master says, go and sin no more lest the worst thing come upon you, he's not necessarily talking about stealing or committing adultery. There are other sins than that. He means do not go back to the same state of consciousness that brought this on, because if you do, a worse thing's apt to come back on you. Now, if what brought this condition on is the belief that there are two powers, a good one and an evil one, that there's a law of disease as well as a law of health, and then you're going to be grateful because the law of disease was annihilated, you're back in the same state of consciousness you were originally. But rejoice only that your name is written in heaven. Rejoice that you have now proven that spirit is the reality of being. Rejoice now that you have proven that there are no evils. There are no laws of disease, no laws of sin, no laws of heredity. Now rejoice that you have borne witness to the fact that God alone is real, spirit alone is real, consciousness alone is real. Then when you give a testimony, you can give a testimony to the healing of a cancer or consumption or paralysis, but don't make that the theme of your testimony. The theme of your testimony must be the truth that brought about the healing. That's the major part of the thing. Every time you hear me give a testimony or make some remark about a healing, remember that the important part that I revealed was the principle that was behind the healing, not the fact that it was blindness or deafness or any other thing. It's nice to know that these conditions can be healed, but it's far nicer to know that actually they had no reality, and therefore it didn't really need healing. It needed merely the understanding that you weren't dealing with anything that needed healing. You were dealing only with an appearance, a suggestion, a claim. If it was something that needed healing, then we'd be in trouble with the law. Why does the law allow us to practice at all? Why? If disease is real, if there is such a thing as infection and contagion, if these are laws, if there is such a thing as a law of tuberculosis or a law of cancer or a law of paralysis, why are we allowed to practice? We don't know anything about those things. We don't know anything about diagnosis. We don't even know if the diagnosis is true when the case comes to us. We don't know anything about that. Why do they allow us to practice? There must have been a recognition in the hearts, souls, or minds of congressmen that perhaps we knew something when we said disease isn't really real and we're not going to heal it. But our knowing of its unreality is the destruction of the appearance of it. Thereby every state has legalized this practice, and all foreign countries have legalized it, in spite of the fact that we know nothing about disease, know nothing about diagnosis, know nothing about anatomy or physiology, know nothing about psychology or mental processes. And yet it not only permits us to practice, it permits us to charge the same fees as the medical profession if we want. I knew a practitioner in New York who took cases on the basis of the nature of the claim and the wealth of his patient. If the patient came to him with a cancer, he said, how much would your doctor, your surgeon, charge you to operate? Well, my surgeon would charge $1,000. The hospital bill, another $1,000. Yeah, I'll take the case. $2,000. If you're healed, you pay me. If you're not healed, you owe me nothing. He went on until he owned a yacht and lived on it. He had men come to him that paid him $50,000 for a healing. it isn't, according to our light, a very ethical way to practice the spiritual ministry, because the spiritual ministry should be more or less on the basis of freely have received, freely give. But that was his concept of the way it should be done, and he did it. But the point I'm making is that the law allowed him to do it. And it allowed him to do it for one reason. He could point to as many healings his way as medicine could point to in their way. Now, so it is that we are permitted under the law to charge the same fees as the medical profession. So it must be that they recognize that there is a healing power in this work, and that the work is not destructive to the health of the nation. And so it is that you must realize when you enter this work, don't try to compete with Materia Medica, because they are skilled in this work on their plane, on their basis, and they know how to treat disease. We don't. So every time you set out trying to heal a person or trying to heal disease, you're trying to be a doctor without a doctor's license, and you won't get far. A doctor will, because he's working on his plane of consciousness where that is the power, but you won't. The only way that you will have success in this work is by not working on the mental or physical plane, but abiding in the spiritual plane. Now, I've probably left out one point that should be covered. Probably when I've covered it, you'll say it's the most important point, but it wouldn't be grasped without this for a background. Nothing that I have said in this last hour and 3/4 will heal anybody. Not a thing that I've said will heal anybody. Beyond what I have said, there is one step more. And that is the consciousness of what I've said. The inner awareness or intuitional feeling of the rightness of what I've said. In spiritual language, we call it the Christ. In other words, it is a step beyond reason, a step beyond knowing the truth. Knowing the truth in and of itself, knowing the truth as it's written, repeating all that's on those tapes, memorizing it, is not the healing agency. Over and above that is the next step, and that is that little inner click. It's a transcendental thing, can't be explained. You can call it God, you can call it the Christ, you can call it Christ consciousness, you can call it spiritual awareness, but that must be the thing that is the final touch that does the healing work. In other words, merely the intellectual agreement that this is true is not the healer, although in the beginning it is sufficient to heal the things that come to us, because in the beginning there are only those things that will be brought to us that can be met with this intellectual knowledge of the truth. Or perhaps it is that even in the beginning, when we've learned this truth intellectually, there is enough of the Spirit comes with it to bring out those healings that are brought to us, those cases that are brought to us. But the main thing now that I want to say to you is this. When you have known these truths, when you have rehearsed in your thought this fact that this is not person, this is not condition, the principle is that God is the law, God is the being, God is the substance, God is the all in all. Even when you have realized that, be still for a minute, or 2 or 3. As if you were saying, "Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth." As if you were opening your ears. And then comes this little quickening, this little feeling in here, or sense of release. And then your healing work is complete. Over and above knowing the truth is this intuitional sense the spiritual sense. And it's called the consciousness of God's presence, or it's called God consciousness, or Christ consciousness, or spiritual consciousness, or spiritual awareness, or spiritual power. Any of those terms are used to describe a transcendental experience or transcendental feeling in which you get a release within you, or a feeling of a weight dropping off your shoulder, or a feeling of assurance within you. That word assurance will do as well as anything else. You get a feeling of assurance. It is done. Thank you, Father. Oh, well, that's that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that your patient will call up right away and say, I am cured, I'm healed. But it does mean that the healing has taken place. Whether or not it becomes evident that day or the next is not the important thing. It is only important that it take place within you. The healing is going to take place. You may have to give another treatment. You may have to give 100 more treatments before your patient finally says, I am healed. And the reason is this. This is true now medically. If you had a boil on your body, for a while it might seem to increase in intensity, in size, in pain. Now, you ask your doctor for help, and he gives you a remedy. There is some point at which that remedy takes hold and the healing takes place. And from then on, it goes the other way. The boil goes down, or it disappears, or it bursts, or it cleans up. But you can't say the healing only took place when it was all clean again. The healing took place at that point where the progress, instead of going upward and forward, began to recede. That's the moment the healing took place, and that is the same thing that happens with us. A healing takes place when the practitioner has that transcendental click, that inner assurance that God is on the scene, or that all is well. However, the patient may have to have a whole new body built for them. They may have to have a whole new heart developed inside, or liver, or lung. They may have to have whole new tissue formed. So they may find that a week, a month, a year elapses before they're willing to say, I'm healed, which means there are no more evidences. But actually the healing began at the moment when the progress of the disease was stopped and it began to recede. And of course, you can't always convince a patient of that. They'll say, oh, no, you keep up the treatment. You can't blame them, because the evidence of the senses still testifies to the disease, even though you have had the assurance on the inner plane that the healing has taken place. Now then, the main thing to watch is that in your healing work, that you never waver from your basis. God is all there is. God is the law. God is the being. God is the life. Call no man on earth your father. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't call them good. Don't call them bad. They're always spiritual. And then, when you have covered your treatment thoroughly, then abide in your treatment. Wait. If you don't get the assurance, stop your treatment and try it over again an hour or two later. If you don't get your inner assurance then, try it over again a few hours later. I have sometimes sat up all night with cases. I have had cases where I've had to sit up 2 and 3 days a night because I couldn't get the click. I couldn't get the inner assurance. I couldn't get the feeling that anything was taking place. And when I don't get that feeling, I just stick by with the case until I do. Then very often I'm apt to get a letter or a telephone or telegraph that the patient hasn't felt it, even though I have had the complete conviction. Well, I have no hesitancy in going back and starting over again. And that's the way it goes on. Patience, because we are not at that state of elevation where all of our healings are instantaneous, nor are we at that state of consciousness where even when they are instantaneous, that the patient can immediately become aware of it. Because sometimes with them it's like a gradual healing to them, even though the healing has taken place. Or recuperation, it might appear in that form to them. And so they may not be as sure as you are that the healing is complete. Now, some practitioners make the mistake of saying to a patient, "Oh, you're healed, I don't have anything more to do with that," and then they set up a fear in the patient. Rarely, if ever, do I tell a patient that they're healed. I rather wait for them to make the discovery. Once in a blue moon, it pops out of my mouth without my having any control. That has happened, that I've had such a result within me that I look up and say, "You're healed." I didn't mean to do it. I never mean to do anything like that. I would rather that they find that out for themselves, as they will. Because sometimes if I say it, they'll get frightened that maybe I won't give them a treatment tomorrow. I don't know what else to say. Protection. The subject of protection must be prayerfully considered, because ordinarily the very word protection sets up the belief that there's something to be protected from. And the moment that happens, you're in worse trouble than if you had known nothing about protection. Now, when your protection takes the form of the realization that God is the only power and that there's nothing to be protected from, then your protective work is good, because you have then taken the power out of the evil person or condition. But if your protective work is in any sense that you have a God protecting you from something, you're lost. That was brought home to us in my Christian Science class. A student asked the teacher, "How do you protect a treatment?" And the teacher said, "I never thought about protecting a treatment, but now that you ask, I can see the wisdom of it. And I think that I would protect it in this way. I'd say, 'Thank you, Father, that this treatment isn't going to heal anybody.'" Now, that's a good protective treatment, because it is an acknowledgement that there never was anything, even before the treatment, to heal. That there was no reality to the claim or appearance. Do you see that? The same way. Too many people protect themselves, but they protect themselves from sinful influences, or from diseased influences, or from infection, or from contagion, or they protect themselves from accident. There is a true story, and this concerns that very practitioner that I spoke of a little while ago. There was a man in New York who was a young student of Christian Science, and he was taking his family on a weekend, a 4th of July weekend, a long weekend. And he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do protective work. And then they started out on their trip, and his next recollection is next Tuesday waking up in a hospital and finding himself and his whole family smashed from head to foot, and his automobile absolutely a wreck, but gone completely, they told him. And it was a long, drawn-out healing. They were in the hospital, all of them, for many weeks before he got out. Well, by that time he was mad. And he decided that he needed a different practitioner than the one he had. And he was led to this man. And he said, "Now here's the story. But he said, if you tell me that I didn't do good enough protective work, I'll throw something at you. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and did a thorough job." Oh, this man said, "No, I wouldn't tell you that. What I have to tell you is the opposite of that. You insured your accident. You were so sure that you were protected from bad drivers and drunken drivers. You were so sure that there was error out in the world, but you had a God who was going to keep you from it, that you just invited it. You were just inviting bad driving and drunken driving all around you, and you got it." Ah, he said, "That makes sense." And then he said, "How should I have done?" He said, "You shouldn't. You should have got down and going on your wheel and said, "Here, God, here we go. I'm glad you're at every other wheel, too." You see that? So, protective work, as long as it involves the realization that there's only one power, only one presence, only one cause, only one law, is protective work. But the moment it involves a person seeking protection from something, you're lost. And that is why we have in the Portland class a tape based on you never spiritually can attain freedom from anyone or anything or any condition. You can only attain freedom in truth, in God, in Christ. Never from. Because the minute you have from, you've got an evil condition or an evil person, and now you're on the level of the belief. You see that? You've got nowhere to go. You cannot get freed from a person, and you cannot get freed from a condition. You cannot get freed from a law. But you can be free in spiritual law. You can be free in God. You can be free in Christ. You can be free in your oneness with God. But that's a universal law, so you're holding your fellow man in it rather than pushing him out there and say, "You're drunk or you're ignorant, and I'm sitting here in an envelope of God, safe from you." See that? Well, here we are, on with the dance. Thank you until we meet again. 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, probably, for most of us.